I'm joined today by Ryan Keuhl, a good friend of mine who spent 12 years playing football in the NFL and 10 years as vice president of sports marketing at Under Armour, and currently has a really cool new business, which he's going to tell us about in the sports consulting business. So, Ryan, thank you for joining us.
Armis, it's great to be here. This should be fun. We spent a lot of time together watching our boys play lacrosse, so this should be a good day. Yeah.
So,
We
tell us a
started
little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah. So a friend of mine from college, we all spent time together at Under Armour. We started a business. I really started in January. He joined about a month ago. Excuse me. And it revolves around, really helping, young brands, we call sport or sport adjacencies that want to use sport for growth or they're in sport directly. And so leveraging my network and my history to really drive opportunities for these young brands. So say brands in the revenue range of, say, startup to $10 million, leading up into Series A, maybe just completed Series A fundraising, where we really can make an impact on their operations, on their strategy, on their target market, on their marketing platforms, both direct socially, as well as driving conversion to online, and really making an impact and getting back to that growth mindset that for me, my 10 years at UA, my first 8 were really growth driven mindset. And that was really what I realized I liked and wanted to get back to. So helping these brands grow and really working directly with the founder owners, CEO owner type folks.
You touched on history. So how'd you go from NFL football player to business guy? What was that transition like?
Well, so I played 12 years and I was a player rep for 7 of them. And I was part of 2 CBA extensions when I was in the union. So the 02 and 06 extension. And that was my first sort of, introduction into really what makes up the NFL or really any league. This idea of labor versus ownership, sponsorship rights, media rights, name and likeness, workplace conditions, all what makes up the whole pie, game day revenue versus license revenue, all of those things. And so having been involved with that, and I was a bottom of the roster guy, right? I never was a big money guy. I knew I was going to have a second career. I was lucky to play 12. I thought maybe I'd play none or 1 if I was lucky.
Right.
And so I got my MBA while I was playing. I was a business commerce school at UVA undergrad. So I knew I was going to have a career. And then these sort of, really my experience doing the CBAs sort of that got my interest even more. And then I was an Under Armour athlete. I was the first guy to wear the cleats in the NFL, and I built that relationship over my last 3 or 4 years in the league and just transitioned out of that. I retired in 2008 after the Super Bowl with the Giants and started there in January of 2009.
Great.
Yeah. So it worked out pretty well for me. And there's some luck, some planning, all that kind of thing. It was all sort of fed into, my ability to transition out of football.
Yeah. And what was that like? So now you went from training and being part of a team to then running a marketing department.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we worked up into that, right? I didn't start
Yeah.
there. The biggest thing I had to realize, and it took me time, football is sports in general. I'm passionate about what it teaches young people, teamwork, the merit is based on how well you play. Can you help us win? And then you accelerate that at the pro level. And I play with a bunch of, great guys and Hall of Fame guys. And, there was always this constant of football is a cut and dry business, right? Your contracts aren't guaranteed. You
Right.
play poorly on Sunday, you can get cut on Monday, you don't get paid anymore. And it is an intense, kill or be killed mentality.
Yeah.
And, I had to realize, it took me years, not a year, to figure out that the business world is not like that.
Right.
Right. And you have people that want to sit on the sidelines and they don't want to quite commit, and they want to, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and they'd rather get no credit than take a risk and maybe get blamed. Right. Like all of these different things and pro football, there's no place to hide. You got 53 guys on the roster and 45 dress, and everyone's going to play. And on Monday, everybody's going to watch the film and find out. You may say you played great on a Sunday afternoon on the plane ride home. I played great. Well, if you say that, you damn well better played well, because everybody on the team is going to see you the next day on film.
Right.
So this sense of immediate accountability and nowhere to hide, and you're honest and you're transparent. You play poorly, you play poorly. You say it. Doesn't mean you're a bad guy or a bad player. You just didn't play that play or that quarter or that game well. And that was a big adjustment. There's a lot of people, in particular in corporations, who, they get into their safe job and they just want to ride it out. And they want to, again, not ruffle the feathers, just sort of move things along versus really make an impact or a difference. And
right.
And the expectations, go up and down based on that as well as a leader or a boss. So that was probably the biggest adjustment I had, getting into, air quotes, real world from pro sports and specifically pro football.
And you jumped right into the fire. I mean, you guys, Under Armour, kind of the upstart, right? At the
time, yeah.
Yeah. And you had Nike and Adidas was still huge, and you had all these people coming at you. So how did you, we're talking about PR a little bit. How did you use that user journey to create awareness to differentiate yourself?
It is so important to have effective PR. And I'm not just doing this to kiss your butt either. But it really is, because it can amplify good. It can mitigate negative if you do it correctly, right? And it can be a voice for the brand when the brand may not want to be speaking, or the company, or and because with effective placement and relationships and getting the proper stories out and framing the stories correctly and ensuring that things are accurate. At Under Armour, we had a great PR team, and Diane Pelkey, who's now at Chewy, Di was awesome. And she could really, when things were bad, she could figure out a way to, either, hey, that's the reality of it, and we just got to deal with it, or is it accurate? Is it not accurate? I mean, like, sort of fighting those fights for us in not only in sport, but also in the sport world, but also in the brand side. And then obviously when things are great and you really want to drive that top of funnel awareness, PR is always an essential part of the strategy. It has to be.
Right.
Because if you can do both the paid and unpaid and do it well, like, you can just be constantly speaking, to your consumer, and you're not spending as much, it can be cost efficient. It can be, when you're not doing a campaign, or you don't think you have the dollars, like a well-placed story, a well-placed interview, in the right channels can really be magnified and give you a big time return.
A lot's changed even in the short time since you've been out of the NFL. Now the players have become their own brand, right? They have their own, they focus on the social side of things to speak directly to the consumer. So how does a brand leverage that if they've got athletes that represent them? How does the brand get top of mind versus the athlete, and how does that all play well?
Yeah, honestly, it depends on the level of athlete you're dealing with.
Yeah.
If you have an athlete, and we had a bunch of really good ones. I was fortunate enough to sign a bunch of really good athletes, and influencers. If you sign those, like, there's just certain rules of the game. They've got their brand, and you're never probably ever going to supersede their brand. But they've also got massive audiences, audiences that are clearly have an affinity for your partner, and you want to figure out a way to best work with them to theoretically, bring a coherent and a message to them from a PR perspective. The younger up and coming, which again, I was fortunate to sign them. I actually saw a lot of athletes transition from sort of the unknown, the ones that didn't have the juice to sort of create the ground to become the athlete that has the ground rules. And those were probably the toughest ones, because you're like, 3 years ago, you were dying for us to do this,
Right.
Now you win a couple majors, or you win a batting title, or you win a 3-point, now we're playing on your rules.
Right.
But the younger ones, they're generally more willing, but you don't get the impact, right? You got to spread a little thinner, and so you probably have to spread it wider, right? To get the same kind of, total audience. So there's different ways to deal with it. You try to do it collectively. You try to do it with them. You try to make sure that it's in their voice, often giving them copy and giving them the asset to post or the link or whatever. The consumer sees that,
Right.
and I think it becomes really just more just like, I'm just going to scroll past it or not, hit it, So you really got to be creative in terms of what you craft, make sure it's in their voice, so the consumer, they don't realize that you're actually marketing to them until after they click on it, right? And so that only happens if it's in the athlete's voice or it's authentic to them. Yep. It sounds like them. It's so you try to give more maybe guidelines or bullet points versus direct copy.
So you're both on the investment side and the consulting side now. So
most of them.
So when a brand's going out for that Series A, if you're part of their team and you're guiding them, what things do they need in place and to have the best shot at getting that investment?
Yeah, I've been around a lot of smart guys, over my years playing football and the PA and the NFL and other now sports and other athletes and other, obviously at Under Armour, we had a lot of smart folks. The ability to communicate, is probably like, you just have to lay out the vision and the path. Here's how you go. And, oh, by the way, I know exactly how to do it. And I know and this is why I know exactly how to do it, because I'm in complete control of my business. I know exactly where things are. And not only that, if I do screw up, I've surrounded myself with this great team.
Right.
If you can do that, then again, you're going to be much further along, depending, are you raising, most time we don't get in the seed level, but the bridge level is the Series A. Like you'll be much further along.
Right. That's right. Well, that teamwork piece of it is critical, right?
Yeah.
Surrounding yourself with the smartest people you can around you that you trust.
Yeah, 100%. Trust is a huge thing because everybody's betting on, if you go to a startup, you're not doing it for annual cash flow, right? You're doing it for the big payoff, right? You're doing it because you want to take a risk. You want to be a part of building something special. And so if you got to make sure those are aligned, which they should be, or they're in the wrong space.
Yep.
You bring on someone and goes, yeah, I want to make X in salary. And you're going, you realize that's 15% of our revenue. You probably got the wrong person, right?
Right.
And so that always works well at the start, and then as success, there's always ebbs and flow and success in your path too, right? There's never a straight line, and so all of that, those sort of details, or that sort of what am I trying to say, like all of those sort of small little bullet points and data points get proven as you zig and zag, and they sort of get re-proven to yourself, or they don't.
Right.
And that also should be a signal to a founder owner that maybe this individual is not the right person, because when things are going well, she was on board or he was on board, right? Yeah. When things were going poorly, he or she wasn't on board. All of a sudden they started getting a little more personal, a little bit more self-centered, or they weren't quite as engaged, or and you got to really be thoughtful about that. Like you probably need to acknowledge that and figure out a way to maybe make changes so that the group that takes you from 0 to 8 million or 5 million is probably not the same group that's going to take you from 5 or 8 or 10 to 40, and that's fine. That's normal. You just got to make sure you're always constantly evaluating those folks.
Well, we just went through one of the biggest zigzags in history with COVID and everything getting shut down, and with everything going on in the world. So, kind of to close, what advice do you give a small sports startup?
Yeah.
Now as we come out of this time of pandemic.
Well, all my group, and they're all good people, and they've worked their tails. They've used this time to set themselves up, right? And so hopefully everyone else has been doing that too. And so as things open up, you can hit go, right? And you can move forward. I mean, sports is in an interesting place right now. I mean, you've got challenges around labor contracts in certain sports. You've got, massive media deals coming down the road here in the next couple of years. Mm-hmm. You've obviously got COVID with, that's how that affects revenues, i.e. attendance to games and sponsorships and everything else like that. like you've really got a lot going on. Obviously, a lot of social unrest. Like, where does that play out in sport? You know, so there's a lot to consider to figure out the best move forward. And so, generally, when things, you know, are choppy waters, you know, you got two schools of thought, right? You're on a boat and the waters are choppy. You either gun it and say, I'm going to get over the wave.
Yeah.
I'm going to slow down and ride the wave, right? And so I think I can't give someone – that's got to be an authentic decision to the founder owner. Yeah. Like, what's authentic? Do they want to plow through or they want to slow down? And a lot of that depends on your team. Again, your team, where you are in the funding cycle, you know, all of those things play into that. What's authentic to the leader? You know, are they sort of a brash, go forward? Well, then if they slow down, they'll probably be a pain in the neck anyway. So we may want to go forward to stay authentic to whatever brand you're in. So I think it's really hard for me to say what's best, but, you know, ideally you're using this time to rejigger, to set up, to plan, to ensure your supply chain is strong, to ensure your messaging strong, your product of innovation pipeline's there. You may have to move some dates around, but you know the bones are there and they're strong. And if you've done that, then you should be able to adjust and get us back to a place when sports gets going, which we all obviously hope and pray for in the right time, that you're ready to take advantage.
Yeah, great. Well, on that note, Ryan, I really appreciate your time
My
today.
pleasure, buddy. Good. I enjoyed it, buddy. Thanks. Good seeing you.